lie starts small, just a whisper, a flicker, but it swells, each breath forcing it larger, tighter until it hovers on the edge of bursting. Sherri Papini's life was that balloon. Every bruise, cut, and burn she inflicted upon herself inflated her story. Each second teetered between control and collapse. What compels a person to lie? We all do it, most of us try not to. If the truth sets us free, what kind of prison does a lie bind us to? And when the lie grows larger than life itself, can the person telling it even recognize where the lie ends and they begin? What unmet emotional need drove a woman to lie to such a degree? The weight of that lie would have crushed almost anyone else. She held it with an unsettling ease. When she was found bruised and beaten on the side of the road, she was met with a tender kindness. The humanity within us begs us to offer open arms to victims, to hug them, to tell them everything will be all right and one day your life will be normal again. This humanity sparked a massive investigation conducted over multiple states, racking up thousands of man-hours required to quash the public's desperate need for a reckoning, to catch the worst offenders hidden among us. How did that balloon become the world on Hercules' back before it burst and the truth was finally revealed? There was no monster at all. There would be no reckoning. Just a quiet, unnerving shrug as the nation looked at her for what she really was, a liar and a cheater. Welcome to Timeless Mysteries. Please like and subscribe. Today we discuss a story that will challenge your assumptions and leave you questioning the nature of truth. What happens when the version of yourself you create becomes more real than the person you truly are? Papini was a 34-year-old wife and mother of two living in Redding, California. She described herself as a stay-at-home mom after being laid off from a customer service job. On the surface, her life seemed ordinary and family-centered. However, friends and family hinted at troubling behaviors in her past, such as fabricating stories, manipulating those closest to her, and even running away at times when life became too overwhelming. How far would you go to control how others see you? Her ex-husband, Keith Papini, revealed that she created false memories of her life, claiming she'd attended college, worked glamorous jobs, or lived in places she never did. When questioned, she would twist the story further, leaving Keith to wonder what was true. What does betrayal feel like when it comes from the person you trust most? How does a community heal when its compassion was used as a tool that allowed a person to hide from the truth they refused to face? These troubling behaviors weren't just quirks. They were the foundation for the grand hoax to come. In the end, her need for validation, control, and escape from inadequacy wasn't just a harmless fantasy. It became a destructive force, tearing apart the lives of those who believed in her. If a lie this elaborate can fool even those closest to us, how can we ever know the truth about the people we love? What happens to trust when the line between victim and villain is erased? Sherri Papini stayed with her ex-boyfriend James Reyes for the full 22 days she was reported missing. Reyes stated that during this time, they didn't leave his house. Reyes also told investigators that the relationship was not sexual. They mostly talked, ate, hung out. Initially, Reyes believed he was helping Papini escape an abusive relationship. He claimed he did not realize the extent of the lie she was building. Papini asked him for his help inflicting injuries to bolster her kidnapping story, including the branding on her shoulder, which Reyes admitted doing at her request. It's unclear exactly when Papini decided she needed to fabricate the kidnapping story, or if it was premeditated before arriving at the Reyes home. However, it's reasonable to speculate that at some point during her stay, she realized returning home without a cover story would expose the affair and destroy her marriage. This might have led to a mental spiral, where the only path back to her family without shame was through victimhood. As for Reyes' participation, while he claimed his involvement was limited to aiding a friend in distress, it's troubling that he willingly inflicted harm upon her, suggesting a lack of healthy judgment on his part. While his actions might not reflect psychosis, they raise questions about his susceptibility to manipulation or codependency, as he blindly followed her request without questioning the consequences. Her willingness to inflict self-harm and manipulate others suggests a breakdown in rational thinking, giving us valuable insight into Papini's unraveling mental state, possibly indicating a psychotic episode or severe emotional dysregulation. Papini's behavior is extraordinary, even among other cases of severe manipulation and deceit. Self-inflicted injuries, branding, and convincing others to assist them in a hoax point to a level of psychological dysfunction far beyond everyday lying. This suggests a delusional breakdown where her need to control how others view her overwhelmed her ability to confront reality. Her behavior points to a blend of multiple disorders such as narcissistic traits and borderline personality characteristics, and a newly renamed disorder, all converging in a desperate attempt to rewrite her reality to her own advantage. Most of you have heard of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. In Papini's case, there is no proxy, so it would simply be called Munchausen syndrome. However, it's now known by another name: facetious disorder imposed on self, where a person creates or exaggerates physical or psychological symptoms to gain sympathy or attention. However, this disorder usually manifests itself in hospital or medical settings, which makes her case somewhat unique since she staged an abduction and torture rather than an illness. Papini's apparent need for control, validation, and public sympathy reflects traits consistent with narcissism. The branding and injuries suggest a willingness to endure real pain to maintain the image she wanted others to see, a hallmark of extreme narcissistic traits. It's possible that Papini experienced a brief psychotic episode triggered by the shame and fear of exposure. In this state, reality can become distorted, leading a person to make extreme decisions to protect themselves from perceived threats, such as social humiliation. Borderline personality is characterized by unstable relationships, impulsive behavior, and fear of abandonment, traits that could align with Papini's desperate actions. People with BPD often create chaos as a way to avoid confronting emotional pain or rejection. It's reasonable to assume that Papini's behavior doesn't fit neatly into one diagnosis. It likely reflects a perfect storm that led to her actions. And in cases like this, the intersection of multiple psychological disorders makes it difficult to assign one clear label. Instead, her behavior might be seen as the product of severe emotional dysregulation combined with an intensive fear of losing control of her own narrative. If you think you've heard of borderline personality disorder before, you'd be right. BPD has long fascinated filmmakers, with the condition appearing in thrillers where emotional instability escalates into obsession and violence. Films like Fatal Attraction and Single White Female depict characters whose extreme fear of abandonment and emotional manipulation lead to dangerous behavior, reinforcing stereotypes that people with BPD are prone to violence. In more modern films, subtle elements of BPD appear in stories like Gone Girl, where the protagonist fakes her own death to punish her husband for infidelity. Similarly, in Black Swan, the main character spirals into self-destruction as her obsession with perfection overtakes her, hinting at the impulsive and emotionally unstable tendencies associated with borderline personality disorder. Sherri Papini was found in the early morning on Thanksgiving Day, November 24th, 2016, on the side of Interstate 5 near Yolo County, approximately 150 miles from her home in Redding, California. A passing motorist spotted her around 4:30 in the morning. She appeared disoriented, and she was waving a piece of clothing in an attempt to flag down help. When approached, Papini told the motorist that she had been abducted, held captive by two armed Hispanic women. The motorist immediately alerted law enforcement, initiating the next phase of the investigation. When police arrived, Papini was found in a physically deteriorated state, with her hair cut short, her body covered in bruises. She was also wearing chains and restraints around her waist and her wrists, presenting the image of someone who had endured prolonged abuse. Her condition was convincing enough that her husband, Keith, who spoke to her over the phone, believed her story without hesitation, expressing overwhelming relief that she was alive and back in his life. This critical moment, being found injured and restrained, served as the linchpin of her fabricated story. The injuries she bore, along with the detailed narrative of two captors, were meticulously staged to convince both her family and the public that she had survived a brutal ordeal. Her elaborate injuries and the fact that she described being freed instead of escaping reflect a careful attempt to position herself as a victim in need of sympathy, allowing her to return to her family as a survivor rather than face the shame of an exposed affair. If you thought this story couldn't get any crazier, you haven't heard anything yet. In the next episode of this 3-part series, we'll dive into the massive manhunt that unfolded, how law enforcement pursued phantom kidnappers across multiple states, and the ripple effect of Papini's fabricated tale on real victims of crime. You'll discover the extraordinary lengths she went to in order to keep her lies intact, and just how far the authorities were willing to go to find two women who never even existed. As always, stay kind, stay vigilant, and always question the truth. I'll see you in the next video.